Hey, listen, we got some things that we gotta discuss, how we can affect the system and make it better for us. But first, we gotta start with the man in the mirror. Open your third eye and the vision's gonna be much clearer. We are revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute, but those who pollute the minds of many. Revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many, y'all. This is the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, y'all.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Alicia.
And I'm Ace.
And we are blessed to be here today with Rev Love. How are you doing?
Peace, friends. How are you? I'm really good. Still grateful.
Yes. Yeah. We're so grateful to be chatting with you today. So thank you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of negativity that comes with all the technology and social media and whatever. But one of the cool things about it is we can connect with someone like you that's all the way over there in Brooklyn, New York.
That's real. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of negativity that can come from the social media and all that. But I personally have made some really great connections on Instagram and YouTube and all of that. So we got to take the good.
Absolutely. Well, I thought that we could start off the podcast by you and I kind of talking about some mutual connections that we have had. Mm-hmm. And I'll just start off. Let's just talk a little bit. Let's do a little storytelling, if that's okay with you. And
story time.
I'll just start. I was a kid, and I was a troubled kid. I got in all sorts of trouble. And then as a young adult, I was on the streets selling and using drugs and got to a really, really low spot. And during all that time, one thing that kept me through that was Tupac Shakur. I had his CDs, and everybody used to kind of laugh at me, actually, as a white boy listening to it. And most people like to listen to some other stuff. But he really got me through a lot of things, a lot of dark times for me, just in that I could feel the pain in his voice and the things that he was going through. And it was like he was talking to me. And then there was an interview one time where I was listening to him, and he said, I may not be the one that changes the world, but somebody that listens to me will take those steps and change the world. And I really took that to heart and really listened to him. And then to make a long story short, I got my life together. I'd met Alicia. I think she was just my girlfriend at the time, but we were living in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I was actually trying to take a native Hawaiian social work class, but the only one that they had was at the same time as a research class that they forced me to take. So I couldn't take it. And I was disappointed at first, but something that happened very fortuitously was that there was a Miss Angela Davis who was on campus for the semester guest teaching a course. And so I signed up for that. And honestly, I didn't even know much about her at the time, but I took the class. And I won't talk too much about that, but she really kind of revolutionized the way that I thought about many different things. And the final project is that we had to present a primary document. The class was called American Punishment. So we were learning about the history of punishment in the United States of America. For that final project where you had to present a primary document, I asked her, would it be okay if I wrote a political prisoner that we've been talking about, one of the political prisoners, and use their letter as a primary document? She said, yeah, that would be great. And so I'm trying to decide who I wanted to write. And obviously Tupac talks about Dr. Mutulu Shakur in his songs quite a bit here and there if you listen closely. And it rang a bell for me, and I wrote him a letter, and I was thinking, this guy's not going to write me back. I wrote him, and it was real quick, like a 2-week turnaround. He wrote me back and was it was like one of the most kind letters I'd ever received. And he gave me everything that I asked for and more. And he sent me the the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Committee paper that he wrote, which was really brilliant. And I read his letter in class and got a standing ovation. Everybody stood up. They were so impressed with the letter that he wrote, and just much different than what everybody else did. Mm-hmm. And anyways, I developed a friendship with Dr. Mutulu Shakur, and we wrote letters a bunch of times. And then one day I don't even remember where we were. We were back in Honolulu, I think. And phone rang, and it was like an unavailable number. And usually I wouldn't answer, but something told me to pick it up. And he called me, and then he just started calling me regularly. And it was really interesting because you hear, I guess it's hard not to have a stigma against prisoners or political prisoners or whatnot, and they're going to want something from you or try to radicalize you or something. But honest to God, all he wanted to talk about was me and my family and see how we were doing. And he didn't want to talk about himself. He just wanted to talk about me and my family. And anyways, we've developed a friendship, and I've been interested and involved with political prisoners and prisoners in general and American punishment ever since. And so one of the things that I've learned through that time and ever since is that one of the ways that you can make people run the other direction is to talk about somebody like Dr. Mutulu Shakur. Mainstream status quo type folks, they're going to run the other direction. They don't want anything to talk about it. You have to find a special people that are willing to open their mind and their hearts and whatever. And it's one of the most meaningful experiences of my entire life. And for those of you that are tuning in that don't know much about it, Dr. Mutulu Shakur was Tupac's stepfather. He was married to his mom, Afeni Shakur, for some time, and he spent most of his life in prison. And it's a really sad deal because when we were talking to him, he was guaranteed to be released. I think that same year, 2016, I believe, he was supposed to get out. Yeah. And everybody was really disappointed that the parole board put up, and it was like really lame stuff that they said he couldn't get out. It was like, because he signed off his letters with
stiff resistance.
Stiff resistance. There you go.
Yes.
Yeah. And so anyways, we stayed in touch, and the saddest part of the story was he eventually did get released, but he was sick. And so he died right after. And I had another friend that I had, Delbert Africa of the MOVE organization. The same thing happened. They waited till he was in prison for 40 plus years, got out and into the real world, and he passed away. But I think that it's very fortunate that they were able to get out and see their family and get some fresh air and whatnot. And we went all the way to, you're in Brooklyn, right?
I am, yeah.
We went to Brooklyn. What's his name? What's his son's name? Tariq?
Talib.
Yeah.
Talib.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went and met him he was working at a juvenile treatment or juvenile detention. And we went over there and talked story with him. And he looks just like the doc.
That's a whole crazy story. Not my story to tell, but Talib didn't know who his father was for most of his life. And he said throughout his life, maybe you'll have him on and he can tell this story. I think he's working on a documentary about it too. But people would be like, yo, you look like Dr. Mutulu Shakur. And he'd be like, okay, all right. And then finally, years later, he's a grown man and he finds out Doc is his father. And I'm like, met him and I'm like, you are the spitting image of Mutulu, Yeah. Actually, randomly ran into him one time on Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn. And my partner was like, wait, Mutulu's out? And I'm like, that's Mutulu's son. No, Mutulu's not out yet. Back when Mutulu was still inside. So yeah, he really looks like him a lot.
Yeah.
That's the exact story he told us when we visited him, isn't it?
Yeah, that was incredible. And it's amazing. I mean, Christian has done so much beautiful work building communication and friendships with political prisoners and been able to bring me into that too. And yeah, the connections that we've made and with Dr. Mutulu Shakur and the MOVE organization, it's opened my mind and heart so much to what is really going on in America, but the world, and these people who are locked behind bars and have so much to offer the world and actually do offer the world behind bars so much anyway. Yeah,
imagine, and it's like you just imagine if they were outside,
right?
Like you said, they literally have offered so much to the world while still being incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
I have actually a Mutulu pin on today. Just it's vintage. Obviously, it says "Free Mutulu Shakur," so obviously he's free. But I mean, I can credit Mutulu with almost everybody I know in Brooklyn. I moved from Toronto to New York, and he's the one who connected me with people. Like, I didn't know anybody when I moved here. He introduced me to Dekui and Sekou eventually, who got out of prison, and the whole community. So people that are living on the outside couldn't connect me with friends and comrades and stuff in Brooklyn, but somebody on the inside who at that point was probably in Colorado has connected me with people in Brooklyn,
It's incredible.
So yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. I don't know if you wanted to talk about, I wanted to just comment on your story that you told, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, because you were talking about how Tupac's music really got you through so much. And growing up in Toronto in the 90s and 2000s, Toronto was like a super East Coast rap city. For the most part, we were trying to be like New York hard. So I was like hardcore East Coast rap. I didn't really feed into the beef, but just the style of the East Coast hip hop, that was my stuff, Mm-hmm. We allowed to curse on this show?
Yeah.
I was going to say shit. That was my shit. But so I didn't really mess with Tupac that much growing up. And it's Mutulu who put me onto Tupac. And now Pac is like not just one of my favorite rappers, but one of my favorite artists of all time. You know, I have Pac on my altar, like, but again, it's just, you know, from the inside, like the influence that he has had on my life is like, I can't overstate it, you know? Yeah.
It's funny how our stories are similar but different, because I grew up in Utah, I lived in the dark age. It was the dark ages before the internet and whatnot, but it was the opposite. Everybody wanted to be West Coast, and they had the whole West East thing. And so we took the West Coast side, but it was still very mainstream. It was more like the Snoop Doggy Dogg and Dr. Dre and all of that. And I remember, like I said, when I was on the streets and whatnot, most of the people like to listen to like Tech Nine and I don't know, I can't even remember all the stuff, but they thought I was weird for listening to Tupac so much. But I really appreciate how you talk to me. Not everyone, but a lot of people just recognize him as this gangster rapper or something like that. But truly, he was an artist. And if you look at the work that he done, one of my favorite books ever is it's up there somewhere, the Rose That Grew from Concrete. And I utilize it all the time in the courses that I teach. One of my favorite ones is Sometimes I Cry. There's several other good ones in there, but if you think about, he was 25 when he passed away, when he was shot, and the amount of music that he had released and even had unreleased is just incredible. And I think often a misconception, and at that time when they were saying, what's the woman's name he always raps about that was trying to smashing his records, the politician.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. We were talking about her the other day, too, and I can't remember her name.
It'll come to me.
Yeah. But
when he raps about certain things, they think that he's like promoting it. But in essence, he's telling the stories. And that's what he would always say. If you would listen to him, he would say, I'm telling it like it is. What do you want me to say? I am telling the stories so that people know about it, and I'm telling the truth. And something that I always respected about him. But the level of artistry that you have to be able to write so many songs that were so powerful. So if you could imagine, how old would he be today? Like 50 or something like that? And
yeah, like 53 or 54 or something like that, right?
Yeah, imagine the level of work that he would have had he been allowed to live. And then I think I'm 42 years old, and I think of my own evolution, and with him passing away at 25, to think that he had the evolution and that level of consciousness and knowledge and all of that at that age is just incredible. It's remarkable. It's even unfathomable to some degree. I mean, even when you think about Mutulu and them, they were really young.
I know. I was just having this conversation the other day, and I'm like, I think about what I accomplished before 25, and it's like, not much, you know?
Right.
And yeah, actually, I was speaking with my friend in Toronto who he was the owner of a hip hop magazine in Toronto called Pound Magazine. So big up Rodrigo. And he makes different documentaries and films now. And he did a documentary about the SoundCloud generation, specifically like hip hop music, trap and all that. And they were going through, you know, I'm not a scientist, I'm not good at like spitting analytics or all that, but they have studies that show that the brains of young people now are way less developed than they were 1 and 2 generations ago. So like a 20-year-old now actually has the brain development of like a 14-year-old of the past. Because, you know, like Fred Hampton.
Yes, that's who I was thinking about,
20,
yeah.
21, like it's, you know what, you watch these videos of these people and you're like, these are different kind of folks. Like, I don't know what has happened to us in our brain power or, you know, our passion. I don't know what's happened to us. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. And I think it's an important conversation, though, because I've said this so many times. A lot of it is intentional with the amount of, especially with the way media is now and the way our food industry is now and the medical industry, all of these things, there's so much nefarious work behind the scenes that goes on. I was looking yesterday, there was some video that popped up about the ingredients in our food now and how junk food used to still be not the best in the past, but the ingredients were a little bit closer to whole foods. Mm-hmm. And now it's just disgusting.
Chemicals.
It's all chemicals. Yeah. It's not even food. Yeah. And we're giving this to our kids. And then we're putting them on iPads and with these shows that just move from scene to scene to scene so quickly that their distraction, their attention span is so small. And then TikTok and all these reels and everything, it can't be anything but intentional. Mm-hmm. Because there's psychologists behind the scenes with all of these things. Yeah. So it's no surprise. That's a shocking statistic, though.
Right.
It's scary. It's really scary. And we try so hard with our own children, but it's hard. Yeah, it's hard not to be drawn in.
Yeah, I know. And I'm not, I'm not trying to put any generation down or anything, but, and I love the youths. Like, we have to love the youths. They are the future, but I look at, just looking around my community, and I don't see too many 20-year-olds that I think could lead a nation.
Right. That's scary.
Well, I think another shift that's, slowly taking place is this idea of that like a politician or a president or whatever is going to change things and save it for us. Whereas back in those days, you're talking about Fred Hampton, Mutulu Shakur, all of them, Black Panthers, Black Liberation Army, they knew that they had to do things themselves and they looked inward. And I think Assata Shakur has a great quote. I can't remember exactly what it is, but she just talks about that if whatever revolutionary organization that you're a part of is not looking inward and trying to continuously revolutionize and change itself, then it's not going to do anything, and it's just going to be fighting, and you're going to be taken advantage of, which still did happen back in the day. Obviously, COINTELPRO and all that infiltrated everything and pushed sides against each other, but they had more of an awareness that they had a power within themselves, and when they organized and when they were together to make a difference, and that's what they did. And I think today, and I don't want to diss anyone, because there's also different people doing different things, but oftentimes you see like a big march or this or that, and again, I'm not dissing those kind of things, but then they're co-opted by the mainstream, by the powers that be, and when that happens, then I think that it's pretty, from my perspective anyways, it's pretty evident that it's not happening the way that it needs to happen, or the way that it should happen. And part of that is the technology and everything, the kind of the globalization of it. We're not organizing so much locally. I'm sure it's much easier probably in somewhere like Brooklyn, because people are still gathering in person, but the movements are more national or even international, which can be positive, but we miss out on that localized type of thing. And I remember both a couple different times when we were dealing with Mutulu, but then when we did that Night of Resistance and stuff like that, we tried to emulate that, and it was really hard. And this was even 10 years ago, not 9 years ago. It was really hard because folks had just transitioned, especially people in the university and stuff. There's not the, radical newspapers where, people can dissent and write about it. If you look at a school newspaper today, it's just like basically some pitter-patter hogwash about, where you can buy your school supplies, and
Jamba Juice is closing down.
And where if you look back in the days, they were doing Free Angela Davis, and there was a lot of dissent and an opportunity for that, and people were organizing locally. And part of that was because you had to, right? There was no other way. We couldn't connect on Zoom or on Riverside or whatever. You had to go and you had to meet people, and you had to pass out flyers and all of that. And so it's in one, like I said, the technology, in one way, it's heartening that people like us three can connect overseas, across the ocean and a continent, really. But on the other hand, we're losing that ability to connect on a localized level, and realizing that if we really want change, at least from my perspective, is that it starts within each of us, and then it moves outward, and we connect and organize and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think moving forward in the future, we've got to figure out how to grasp both of those things. Utilize the technology, but also find a way to stay local and stay connected, and being able to lock arms versus just talk over Zoom.
Yeah, of course. And of course, like you said, the change has to come from within, and it's like, I don't know. I feel like there's this disconnect. People think that then we're talking about like yoga and meditation, and that's like so disconnected from the revolutionary struggle. But even before I was super into yoga and meditation, like just being a part of revolutionary organizations, and we had to study Mao Zedong or study whoever that we had to study. And, Mao talks about the contradictions. Like, this is for its contradictions in society and also within ourselves. Like, this forces us to look within, so to me, like, revolutionary struggle is looking at ourselves to make sure that we are not perpetuating any of these things that we seek to change in society, and like a good revolutionary organization will make you do that. Yeah, if your revolutionary, like Assata said, if your revolutionary organization isn't making you look within, or they're not looking within, like, what else can we change,
Exactly. And it's a big thing we talk about in social work, because it's generalized, but there's large groups of social workers who are doing amazing work for the people they're working with, but not doing any of that inner work. And I think it's only temporary, and you can only go so far in that way. But there's I've also seen a lot of defensiveness, like you're saying, when you do start to say, let's look within and let's focus. And that's not selfish, and it's not taken away from the work. It's adding to the work. It's bringing that energy out of you so you can give it to the world. But I think there's still so much resistance with it.
Yeah, it's the same in like in the yoga world too. You know, again, like no judgment, but there's definitely great teachers out there who lead great classes. But then if you witness them in their life outside of class, you're like, well, you're not quite implementing all of those philosophies, you know?
Yeah.
And we're all humans doing the best we can do on our path. But like you said, there's only so far you can go if you're not actually doing the work yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just curious from what you said, Rev, where you are locally, how do you find that balance of having this online kind of global community, but also organizing locally? I imagine it's a little bit different for you there.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you know, New York City, millions and millions of people. Sometimes it can be overwhelming, to be honest. And you have all these different pockets. So, like the political prisoner world was very big some years ago, and you know, kind of dwindled away. You know, thankfully we've freed a few of them. There are still more political prisoners to be freed, but the community isn't as big and strong as it was. You know, like it goes through waves and it goes through popularity. So obviously Palestine is huge right now, so everybody wants to be involved in the organizing for that. But then, like Ace was saying, like sometimes things get co-opted, and you go to the protests, which, you know, thank God and thank the organizers that there are protests all the time happening for Palestine, but there's mad people at these protests that are just there for photo ops, you know, and I'm like, that's not really helpful. You know, I mean, is it? Maybe it's helpful because it brings numbers to the streets, but again, like the protest can't be the only thing we're doing. We have to do other work outside of that. I don't think a protest in and of itself is enough to really spark a great change. Yeah, versus online. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I've met a lot of great people online and done some really cool things like this. And, you know, just the fact that this is a digital platform, somebody in Bolivia will be able to see this. Somebody in Rwanda will be able to see this, whereas they may not be able to see the protest in New York City or the political prisoners letter writing night that happened. So, yeah, I think it's good to have a balance for sure.
Well, it's certainly beneficial for us because we haven't really lived in anywhere even close to relevant to New York City. We've been in different places in Hawaii. We've been in Alaska. We spent a little bit spell in Utah. And so in order for us to connect with people, we have to be able to connect online. It's really the only way. We have traveled here and there to go visit folks. But for the most part, we need it. I think something that a lot of the current generation doesn't recognize as well is that how much these things can be infiltrated. You know, I've been taking a deep dive on the FBI and the CIA over the last little while, and in a way it's fascinating, and it's so troubling to me because I think about, you know, if you're interacting with someone or somebody comes to a group, like I really don't think that we understand the level of infiltration that happens sometimes. And so even if you're on an online thing or whether you're at a march or a protest or a meeting with a group, it's very likely that they're at least going to try to infiltrate that somehow and skew the way that you look at things, sow division, you know. And I think you prop up Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States of America, and we listen to his I Have a Dream speech and all of that. But it's rare that we talk about how the FBI would send him letters telling him to kill himself and sending, you know, letters to the Black Panthers, mimicking each other, trying to sow division. And then I think we were talking about Fred Hampton. I think it's important. He was murdered by the police and the FBI. Was 21 years old, I think. And he was trying to create what he called the Rainbow Coalition, where he was working with the Young Lords, working with white folks, working with all sorts of people. But he's trying to bridge that gap and work together in such a way. And I think that's why he was so dangerous. And that's why they eliminated him was for that. And there were a lot of people that talking about revolutionary, this and that, but he was taking it to a whole nother level. And actually, instead of dividing, he was connecting. And I think that's why he was seen as so dangerous. And I think when we think about movements in today or revolutionary ideas movements, it really stresses me out in a way because I wonder, how do you overcome that? And how do you, so for example, I don't know the exact budget today, but if you look at how much money the FBI and the CIA gets to play with historically, it's unfathomable. And so if they have all that money to spend on social media and sending agents and paying, because they really just dole it out like nothing. It shocks me every time I come across some of this evidence. And so, I mean, I don't know where I'm trying to go with this. I'm just saying that it's.
No, but we're over here like scrounging our money together just to help our movements, and they have infinite budgets, like just the Palestine protests. It's been very interesting to witness the progression of the repression over the past year and some months since all these major protests started. And the NYPD's budget has expanded over and over again just to deal with the protests. And there are drones at all the protests now. You know, you'll just look up and you're like, oh, okay, well, they could probably read my phone. They're definitely clocking my tattoos. Like, they know exactly who all of us are. So yeah, how do we as the people combat that, you know, or even just survive our organizing? You know, I don't have those answers right now.
No.
It's hard to know because let's say like I get an email, which I do for people about the podcast, and say, hey, I mean, I have to question. I shouldn't have to do that, but I have to question, like, is this and
then it's no wonder that within these movements you go a little bit crazy because you become paranoid about who can I trust?
Yeah.
Who is there on my side? But I think that the biggest thing, I mean, one of the hardest things, most challenging, but one thing that we do have some control over is not letting that division take over us. Because I think there's so many like labels for things now, and so many, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're to like sports teams, to everything. There's division everywhere, racism, all of that division. And if we don't, I think we need to take more power in not leaning into those divisive systems in nature. And I think the elections was just such a prime example of everyone just jumps onto a side and everyone is just leaning so much into what they want us to do is continue to divide, and we're doing it for them. We just keep doing it. And I think that's one thing that we can lean into and have some control and power over. But still, it's hard.
Yeah, I know. But you know, it's like still, like, I agree completely with what you're saying, but how can we find the balance between not letting that divide and conquer, or those divide and conquer tactics work on us, the people, but also being cognizant that there are agents, like pretty much everywhere, even if they're bots, right? Like there are bot agents, and then they have keywords or whatever, and it pops up in their computer, and they're like, oh, we need to be paying attention to what those people are doing, or, you know?
Yeah.
But the election.
Yeah. Gosh.
You've mentioned the election a couple times.
It's just wild.
It was frustrating for us because, especially in social work is extremely on the Democrat side, and it left us without a place to go because we're very independent and we believe in being critical of everything, of everyone. And basically in the field of social work, criticizing Democrats to them is equivalent of being a MAGA person, make America great again. And so if we would ever say anything, that's what we would be attributed to us, which couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually ridiculous if you know us. And so we just felt alone in a lot of ways. We still speak our truth and say what we got to say, but it's really disheartening how much I feel like people, specifically in the field of social work, are hoodwinked in that regard and unwilling, whatever, to look at their party with any kind of critical scrutiny. Again, it's looked at if you do that, then you must be for the other side, or you just must be you're going to get Donald Trump elected.
Yeah.
And that's the craziest thing, just to be like, if you criticize something, that means you have to be the other thing. And the fact that there are only two options that they give folks, like, I'm Canadian, and like when I enter spaces that I know they don't want to hear my radical views, I just default to, I'm Canadian, I can't vote in the US.
That's what I do. Yeah, I'm British, I can't vote. But it's crazy that we have to do that.
I know, because they don't want to hear it. It's the same, like you said, in the social work world, in the yoga world, in basically all of New York City, which is like neoliberal, you couldn't criticize the person running for the Democratic Party. You cannot do that, or else it means that you are voting for the other person. It's like, guys, we got to be able to do better than this.
We have to. We really have to. And they're just two sides of the same coin. I've seen you say this a lot too. And I think a video I was watching of yours recently was talking about how corporations are the real leaders behind everybody, that you follow the money and their investments are just they connect. They are nefariously investing in all these things that are against our benefit, value.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that I learned just very recently that I picked up learning about the CIA and the FBI, is that after the Bush era and the whole Iraq and Afghanistan and all of that, was that essentially the CIA and the FBI, they had trouble recruiting agents anymore. They were looked down upon in a lot of ways based on what had happened off the misinformation and et cetera, and that they were basically co-opted by corporations. And so what happens is, and I need to get up to date, post Obama and post Eric, because I'm not that familiar. I've got a few books ordered, but anyways, what happens is that the CIA will recruit somebody and they'll train them, but they can only offer them the government wage, where a corporation can offer them more. And so essentially, corporations will go and hire the CIA agents after they've worked there for 2 years, and then they'll do clandestine services for them, making a lot more money. And so essentially you have these highly trained people that do espionage and all sorts of shit, and now they work for corporations. And I think another element to that too is how Obama's often propped it up, but one of the worst things that he ever did is he gave them permission to spy on Americans, which wasn't allowed before. They still did it, but at least it wasn't allowed, or it wasn't supposed to be allowed. It was against the law. But now it's legal for them to do that. And so they can be monitoring whatever that you're doing. And so
I had I'm sure we've all read, especially if you're looking into CIA stuff, like we've read or seen documentaries about stories of ex-agents who decide they come out and, tell some of the secrets. And the stories always go like, they recruited me out of university, trained me, brought me in. Of course, like you said, things have changed over the years. Now it's mostly corporations. The government doesn't have as much money, I guess, for these to hire them. So I had read so many books or seen so many documentaries or interviews about people that it goes like that. And then, I'm not going to use any names, but I used to be close with a family, and they have a lot of money. Their son went to a Ivy League university. He got recruited in university out of an engineering program. He couldn't talk about the company that recruited him. He couldn't talk about anything, but over a couple of years, I realized that it was Lockheed Martin. And he moved out to the West Coast to work for them. He can't talk about where the office is located. They have another office in New Jersey, but he can't tell his family exactly when he's coming back to the East Coast. He just shows up. Like, he can't talk about what he does. He can't talk about anything. I think the whole family had to get investigated before he could be hired. And so I'm like, okay, well, yeah, he works for Lockheed Martin, but you're working for the CIA, like, obviously, And so just the fact that, we've read all of these things, but for me to see it happen in real life, I was like, oh, okay, that's giving more credibility to all these stories that I had read and heard over the years. I'm like, no, okay, that's really how it happens. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My goodness. And even talking about this stuff, though, I think even this conversation, the way algorithms work on social media, it's not push, it's silenced.
Yeah.
Right? Like, as soon as we started talking about Palestine on the podcast, like, I would post clips on TikTok. We were completely banned on TikTok as soon as we started talking about that.
Wow.
TikTok's one of the more open ones in that regard. But whenever I talk about political prisoners, it will eventually break through because people search for it and they find it. Mm-hmm. But at first, it doesn't work via the algorithm. Actually, it shuts off the whole channel almost, like my YouTube. Our YouTube, it'll go from whatever it's doing at the time and it'll go to zero. Nobody's watching anything.
Yeah, that's what happens in my stories too. And I'm like, okay, guys, like, try to be a little more clandestine with it if you don't want us to know, because I'll have a story that'll be like, oh, whatever, I'm teaching yoga tomorrow at 6 p.m. There's like 400 views, and then the next story is about something controversial, whether it's Palestine or political prisoners, and then there's like 12 viewers, and I'm like, from one story to the next, like, come on,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we should shift gears, but I just wanted to touch on one more thing real quick. We're talking about like the CIA, is that folks should be aware of this, is that the CIA is heavily involved in Hollywood. So if you watch movies, there's two of them that I could take, for example, that's recent movies. What's the one about Fred Hampton that came out? I don't remember the name.
Judas and the Messiah?
Yeah, Judas and the Messiah. Well, it's brought from the perspective of the FBI. And then you look at even the Black Panther movie. One of the very good guys is the white CIA agent, the guy that plays the Hobbit. I can't think of his name, but he's a CIA agent. And if you look at the history of the CIA, they failed at almost everything they've ever done historically. And so they're not that. They aren't these great good guys that go and save the day. But it's very interesting that it appears that folks aren't allowed to make a movie that includes them, or to make a movie about something revolutionary. Because the Black Panther is a huge word, I know they're using it in a different context, but that's a huge term. And they're basically not allowed to do that without getting the approval of them and presenting them in a certain light. So I'm almost certain, like of the movie The Black Panther, that the CIA said, okay, you can do it, but you got to insert our boy here, and he's got to be part of it, because he's just he could totally be just eliminated from the movie and it wouldn't change anything. So it's very interesting that they added that in there. And then again, the same thing with the Fred Hampton movie. It's from the FBI. It's right from the FBI agent's perspective, right?
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah,
the whole of Hollywood.
Sorry, go ahead, Alicia.
No, you go.
No, I was just saying, I came across a CIA spy ops documentary the other day, and I was like, okay, I'll put it on, whatever. And then I realized it was literally CIA propaganda. Like, it was CIA agents trying to demonstrate that they were the heroes, and that, we went into Afghanistan and we got bin Laden, and like telling the hero side of the story. And I was like, oh my gosh, I guess that's what it's come to. They have their own propaganda videos now,
And it works.
I guess all of Hollywood, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't realize that for quite a while, just how much money that they do put into Hollywood, and how much kind of what am I trying to say? Like decision making and what can go into these movies, how much power they have with that. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much power and money they put into it. And what we're seeing is what they're saying is okay to see, basically.
Right.
Didn't that Ben Affleck movie Argo win movie of the year, film of the year? I remember watching that, and it's a good film, and it's about how they went in as a fake Hollywood thing, and they rescued some captives in Iran, some hostages in Iran. But it's funny, it doesn't tell the whole story about how it's the CIA who made all that shit happen and was funding Iran and Iraq at the same time and making them fight each other. It's really just insane. And I think even we were talking about, this isn't the CIA, but we were looking into George Soros yesterday, and I was learning that he funds both sides. He funds the pro-Palestinian protest, and he funds the anti-Palestinian protest. And so that's literally sowing division. It's crazy.
Yeah. That's what the video that Alicia was referring to on my Instagram was about. I was talking about like Lockheed Martin and Halliburton, just as two examples. Like, they both funded Kamala and Trump. They like openly funded one, that they openly endorsed one, but then privately they financially funded both candidates. And so it's like, these are like, I just Googled that, so, but like people don't want to Google that, and they want to, like, I don't know, people are the people in a point where they want division, like,
that was what I was wondering, right? Because even if you say these things and you share these things with people, everyone's like, la, 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 like, don't want to hear it and just want to stay with the narrative that's going along, because it's, I guess, more comfortable, less challenging to a lot of people's beliefs, which is, I can empathize with that.
Yeah.
But how do we move past that then in just like the larger communities? I think there's communities that we're involved in that do want to talk about these things and don't want to ignore it. But then when we go wider and we go to the mainstream, especially in social work, which is supposed to be about social justice and looking at these systemic issues, but even in those spheres, we're finding that people don't want to hear it. They just want to stay in the narrative, the mainstream narrative that is going on with the status quo. We have this side, which one are you on? And then just don't question anything else. I don't know how we move past that.
I don't either. And like, that's how the yoga world for the most part is too. And I'm like, if even yoga is like this right now, I'm like, again, yoga itself is like supposed to be examining the self and like not accepting divisions. Like, this is all about oneness, transcending the dualities. But if we're talking about like the duality of Democrats and Republicans, and I had like a real moment at the election because I saw some yogis online being like, vote. You have to vote for our liberation. And I'm like, wait, I thought our yogic practices were for liberation, not like, what do you mean? And it's almost like in a shaming way, like if you don't vote, you're part of the problem. And I'm like, Oh my gosh, this is yoga. Like, So yeah, I don't know. We got to keep on keeping on with things like this, I guess.
I think that's what it is. Yeah, it's just be consistently putting it out there and having these conversations. And then, like we do, I think that's why I love doing this podcast, is because then we expand our community a little bit each time, and we connect with amazing people like you. And we know there's other people out there that want to talk about this. And I think that's what we're going to have to just keep doing, is rippling out.
Well, that's we talk about a lot of the, at least I have in this podcast so far, talked about some of the things that have made me feel bad or look down on things and whatever. But truly being involved in some of the revolutionary movements, talking to Dr. Mutulu Shakur, making friends with Delbert Africa. I could name 100 different stories. Going to Brooklyn and meeting with Talib. It's been one of the most hopeful things ever in my life. And it just fills up my heart with joy. And it's also so counter to how some of these things are often represented in the media and whatnot. And how people are. And I've only felt, literally, this is not an exaggeration, I have only received love and kindness back to me in these kind of movements.
Like nothing but revolutionary love.
Right. No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what you look like.
No. If you're down, if you've got the heart, and like that's it. Like I remember Mutulu had I was going to Atlanta for a work trip, and he's like, okay, I got people in Atlanta. And this was kind of a little earlier. I mean, we were communicating for like a pretty long time, like 20 years. So this was probably within the first 5 years of us communicating. He's like, okay, I got people in Atlanta. You're going to meet them all. And it was almost like a test. He wanted his real comrades that he knew he could trust. He knew them for years, to see me, because I hadn't seen him. It was just letters and phone calls at that time. And they weren't looking at me like scrutinizing me. They were just like, okay, Mutulu sent her here. We're going to meet her. And yeah, she's good. They told him back. And again, it was just like love. And then they kind of reported back to him. And then that's when our relationship got, even tighter. But like you said, if you show that you have the heart for this, it's love. These are all things. It's like how history has been rewritten, Like one of Mutulu's best friends of all time is Susan Rosenberg, like a white Jewish American lady who did 16 years in prison from the activities that she did with the Black Liberation Army. We don't ever talk about that, and it's just, again, sowing this division.
It is.
He gave me her number back in the day, and I was afraid to call her. I was still a little bit shy about those kind of things, but I wish I would have reached out. Yeah. But he's he connected me with his son, and yeah.
The impact that he's had, and other political prisoners, the impact they have, the energy they've put out there, and then the seeds they sow. I think that's what is so important, because they may be locked up behind these bars, but the seeds they sow onto other people, and then if we let them grow, then we can make change. And there is so much hope in that. And I think they see that there is hope in that.
Yeah, I think their vision was a lot further ahead than most of ours at this time. And it's just like you were saying before, when I come to times or spaces or whatever, where it's like the yoga world is telling me if I don't vote Democrat, I'm not voting for liberation, and I'm like having like existential moments or whatever. Literally just bring myself back to, well, I had some really amazing teachers, and Mutulu would tell me this, and I don't have to worry about if everybody around me is like, vote for liberation. It's your revolutionary duty. I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy. It's okay. There are wise ones that came before us that could see a little bit further than maybe we're seeing right now.
You have to ground yourself in that. And I think that leads us on to just the sound healing that you're doing and the amazing work there. And I saw you post something about, you said, we are not spiritual delusionists. And I loved that statement when you said that. Also, it was on one of your pages, and just the fact that justice, because we say to do these things, right? Go to these sound healing classes, do yoga, go inward. But then people are living in places where it's very hard to do that when you don't have your basic needs or basic safety met. And
or there's war outside your window.
Right, exactly, right. And justice, and then peace. But just how do you find it is bringing those spaces, those sound healing spaces to people? Like what kind of energy does that bring, and how does that help this process of justice and then peace?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question. I think that is my life's work that is slowly unfolding. So every day I learn more and more about how, because I went through many years where I also felt it was two extremes. Like I had this yoga practice, meditation, and then I had my revolutionary life, and I didn't know how they came together. They just felt so far. But I've learned over the years that that's by design, and yoga has been completely watered down and whitewashed in the West. Yoga is a revolutionary practice, and it's not just your asana. It's not just downward facing dogs and sun salutations, right? Like yoga is so much more. And so sound is a yogic practice called Nada Yoga, and it's meant to enhance our deep listening. If we can practice deep listening, I mean, that in itself, I feel like we're terrible listeners in society. Like we don't listen to each other. We don't listen to the needs of others. We don't listen to the needs of our partners or our children even. We don't listen to our own needs a lot of times because everything is like dictated from outwards. And so the same as we were saying, like a good revolutionary organization makes you go within. Yoga is meant to bring you within, to cause that revolution from within out. And if you are purifying your heart and your mind as an individual, there's no way that doesn't radiate out into the world, But sound healing in particular, I mean, I've been a musician forever. Like I've been singing my whole life, and that just came naturally out of music and yoga. And question that you asked, like how it is in those spaces, I mean, my partner and I, like we do the best that we can to always bring a revolutionary perspective into everything that we do. So it's no different when we step into a yoga studio, even if it's full of people that are not revolutionary minded, not even politically educated. We try to bring elements in to it and just let people know that this is revolutionary, right? And like, you're not meant to just keep your practice on the mat. That isn't that revolutionary. You're meant to take the practice off the mat into the world and affect the world, especially in this time, like where the revolution looks different. Like the revolution has evolved. We all love the Panthers, and we all love this like romantic idea of revolution. That's not going to happen this time around. You know what I mean? Like they are always going to outgun us. They have nuclear weapons. Like if we're scrounging together money just to put protests and actions together while they have millions of money for drones, like that's not our revolution. The revolution has to come from a more spiritual perspective at this point. And to me, like the spiritual perspective, it's not just about our consciousness evolution, but everything that comes with that. So like educating our own children, growing our own food, creating our own, I don't even want to use the word system, like our own ways of being and living that don't depend on their systems, so that's all part of like a spiritual revolution. So I don't know if I went around your question or if I answered your question.
No, that was beautiful. And I find it really difficult in my own work, in my own like clinical work with people, because I do try and bring in a lot of just the wisdom and the energy of yoga into when I'm doing therapy with people. It's hard because people do just see the yoga asana as that is yoga. And so trying to go deeper than that and talk about the union of self, but also this energy we put out into the world. I look at it as planting seeds. It's okay if someone does not grasp that, but if I can just keep planting those seeds, then this consciousness and this frequency can just keep rippling outward. And if, as long as I am practicing that myself in my own life, and which I'm definitely far from perfect, but I try so hard to do that. And I think if we can keep doing that our inner work, but also planting these seeds in when we interact with people, then we can find some movement and hope there and get to a place where just rippling out that energy. You can get to a place where that division and all of these distractions from the external world become less important. And this is just authentically, naturally becoming more important in other people's lives. That's my hope. That's my vision. Seeing this.
And I love the planting seeds analogy, because anybody who has planted seeds, like we know they don't just turn into flowers or trees a day after. Some of them can take a long time. I planted some seeds in a pot and I was like, oh, I guess they're never going to grow. And it was like a year and a half later, some little sprouts came up and I'm like, what? So it's the same thing. Like, we just keep doing our good work and planting all those righteous seeds that we can, and they will come to bloom whenever in all the different people that they were planted in, you know?
Yeah.
Think about that, and taking it back to the conversation about Tupac. Think about, although he passed away at a very young age, 25, think about all those seeds that are still out there. One right here.
Yeah.
For
Another
sure.
one here. And it's so crazy. I was speaking with like an 18-year-old who grew up in New York City, and she was like, you know, I'm not really into old school hip hop. Like, you know, she says old school. She's like Biggie and Nas and that. I'm like, oh, I'm real old if that's old school, you know. But she's like, you know, I should be into those rappers because I'm from New York and stuff. But I'm not really into that. But I love Tupac. Tupac is like my man. 18-year-old, you know. So
Continues.
yeah,
It really does.
yeah.
And this conversation also makes me think of, there are ways that really just cost no money, and you need nothing else but yourself to be able to do this work and to connect with people, right? Like, we don't need all the money and the investment and the funds that the CIA and the FBI have, because we're coming from a standpoint of love, and that frequency is just so much stronger than everything else.
Which
that's
they're
against
never going to
us.
have.
No.
Yeah. So
And hate can't beat that.
No.
So
our
we
love
stand from that.
frequency is rich.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Well, I think we got to push forward and wrap things up in sometime soon. But I wanted you to share a bit, if you wouldn't mind, about Veronza Bowers.
Yeah.
I saw some things about his music on just briefly on your. I just became familiar with your Instagram recently, but it was interesting to me. And one thing that you'll see about a lot of political prisoners, prisoners in general, but especially political prisoners, is how they use art in various ways. If you look at Lakota prisoner Leonard Peltier, you know, he's in there creating some really cool artwork, and it just touches me in a different way. But I don't know, I can't really put words to it. So I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about him.
Yeah, Veronza was, I guess, one of the lesser known political prisoners. He founded the Black Panther Party in Omaha, Nebraska. Like, who knew that there were Black Panthers in Nebraska, you know? And it's just like, cut to present time, it's been such a blessing. He came to New York for all of December. And so even though I had been communicating with him for years, it was our first time meeting. And not being over the prison phone, he could finally tell stories about stuff, you know? And so he went out to California to meet with Huey and Bobby Seale to get their permission to open the office in Nebraska. They gave him the permission. Bobby Seale came out and opened it with him. But very shortly thereafter, the FBI tried to pin this like random murder on him. He escaped. He was, you know, living free for a little while, living guerrilla under the radar for a little while. And then they finally arrested him and, you know, said that he killed a state trooper, a park ranger. And there was zero evidence linking him to that crime, except the eyewitness account of two people that 20 years later, it was proven that they were government informants. One of them was paid $10,000. One of them had a petty crime that was reduced. He still remained in jail for 51 years. So he's one of the longest held political prisoners in American history, 51 years in federal prison. But in prison, he became, he was really into martial arts, Qigong, and meditation before he went in. But obviously being in prison, he really got deeply into those practices and also music. And he got to tell a story about meeting some other political prisoners. I don't know much about how they got there or why, but it was a Lebanese and a Palestinian political prisoner. And they gave him a flute, like a wooden flute made out of a tree in Lebanon. And he learned how to play the flute from that, just, you know, one of these little kind of recorder style flutes. Yeah. He learned how to play it from that and became a sound healer. Way back in the day, before all the laws that they have now, you could actually have instruments in prison. So he got a silver flute. He started playing with bands in prison. And then shortly after that, he came across the Japanese bamboo flute called the shakuhachi, and it has a particular healing frequency, and met a man who makes them from hand. That man became one of his greatest supporters for like 30 years. His name's Monty. Monty's amazing. So yeah, Veronza had these recordings of flute meditation music that they recorded on a cassette tape in prison, and they were just dusty in somebody's basement. We got a hold of those, digitized them, cleaned them all up. There was like a lot of prison noises in the background, yelling. You could hear the prison guards and all this stuff. We cleaned them up and we put them out. I was going to put them out exactly as they were, cleaned up, and then he stopped me. He's like, no, I had a dream. I need you guys to add other instruments. My partner and I, so we had like crystal bowls, Tibetan bowls, different, sound healing instruments. And then at his insistence, my voice. I was really like against it at first because I'm like, no, it's your project. I don't want it to be about me. But then my partner, who is the founder of the record label, was like, yo, it's his record. If he wants you to be on his record, then you just do it, So we put it out, and it did a lot to bring light to him as a political prisoner, because he, like I said, he was one of the lesser known political prisoners, and he did come out in May of 2024. I figured we'd talk about it. So I have this here. This is, we made a vinyl version of it. It's called Finding Peace in the Chaos. And it's the vinyl version is so beautiful. It has a whole, a letter that Veronza wrote. And
is that available?
Yeah, so it's a double vinyl, and you can just hit up Veronza's Instagram. I mean, anybody can hit up Veronza's Instagram, which is at Veronza Bowers, and get a copy of it. It's beautiful. People that don't have record players have bought it just because it's like a collector's thing, right? It was like recorded in prison. Yeah, it's really special.
We're all about the vinyl. You gave me the chills, so I'm very happy because most of the stuff you can get on vinyl is just mainstream.
Yeah,
whatever
stuff. But listening to is finding Peace in the Chaos. That's the name of it, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I was listening to it with our 5-year-old yesterday, and it was just wow. It was incredible. And so to have that on vinyl, we'll definitely be getting that.
Yeah, we'll send you one.
Where's he at right now?
He's at an undisclosed location because he still gets threats from the family of the park ranger that was killed, even 50 years later. He came out. Yeah, so this album was released when he was still incarcerated, but he was released 14 months after. So we released the album March 2023, and he was released May 2024.
Wow, I didn't realize that. That's very good news. That also fills up my heart. So
yeah,
right on.
Yeah. So he's healthy. He's an elderly man, but he's healthy because, as you said at the very beginning, coming full circle here, they released Mutulu, Delbert Africa, Russell Maroon Shotes, I think Herman Wallace, so many political prisoners. They only release on what they call a compassionate release, which means they're very ill and they know they don't have much longer to live, so they just let them out because of that. Just we give thanks that they got to be out for a brief amount of time and see their family and their friends and stuff, but I don't know, it's not, to me, is it a win? Is it a win still if they just came out and passed away? It's hard.
Right. Isn't it Fred Hampton that said, you can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution?
Yeah.
That's,
And there are several folks we're talking about. Assata Shakur is in exile in Cuba, has a daughter here in the United States. You have Leonard Peltier, I mentioned him earlier, Lakota revolutionary, an artist. He's still in prison. You've got, who else
Kamal
you got?
Siddiqui.
Yeah.
Imam Jamil Alameen.
He wrote me back too. He said he was going blind.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, he is fully blind now.
Yeah, it's actually his cellmate wrote me back on his behalf and told me that he was going blind, and I never know. So here's another thing that happens once in a while to me is I'll communicate with somebody behind bars, a political prisoner, and then they'll add me on social media and say that they're them, and I never know if it's them or if it's somebody trying to dupe me, and that happened with him. But so I was like, well, how is he writing me if he's blind? And he wasn't saying it was somebody on his behalf. So really weird things like that. And if you don't know who he is, he's formerly H. Rap Brown, And he has some really cool interviews. If you look at him, if you just go on YouTube and look up H. Rap Brown, it's really interesting stuff from back in the days.
I see that a lot. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
No, I was like just about the social media. Like I see that a lot, you know, because I did start Veronza's Instagram when he was still incarcerated, and it'll be like, you know, his is Veronza Bowers, but it'll be like Bowers Veronza just started following you, you know, or like I think I've been followed by 4 different Kamau Siddiqui accounts, and I always have to check in with the actual organizers if this is real, and it never is.
It's not.
I'm just like, yeah.
And I think sometimes it could be people that are trying to do something for them, or I mean, like without their consent, but maybe have good motives. But you just never know. It's really weird,
I know.
especially the one with the one I mentioned. It's just weird. I've had a few.
Yeah. I did want to just mention Bilal Sunni Ali, because he just passed away last week. Bilal was a founding member of the Harlem chapter, the Black Panther Party. Bilal, even though he never took on the Shakur last name, he is part of the Shakur family. So Mutulu and Sekou Odinga, they're brothers, all of them, like bona fide brothers. So great revolutionary, but also notably he played in Gil Scott-Heron's band, the Midnight Band, sax player and flute player. So Bilal was just an epic human, and he just passed away last week. So I just wanted to, you know, bring his name up here.
Yeah, thank you for honoring him. Gosh, and I just encourage everybody that's listening to this to, if you don't know these political prisoners, to look them up and learn about their stories, and you can hear the amazing humans that they are. And they may have been pictured very differently in the media or from history that you may have learned, but if you really look at their stories, they're incredible artists, humans, you know, healers, among other things. And so, yeah, do your research too.
Yeah, and if you know, I mean, you could take a stretch and try to write somebody if you feel so inclined, but there's also plenty of literature out there that's in their own words. We talked about Search for Me in the Whirlwind. That covers the New York 21 is what they were called, including Afeni Shakur and Lumumba and Zaid Shakur. There's this, if you want to know about Asada Shakur, her autobiography is freely available online, or you could buy the book. It's excellent.
One of my favorite books. Yeah.
In their own words, and you could look further than that. Mumia Abu Jamal, and we haven't mentioned him, but he's old and sick as well, and still in prison. And one of the things that you'll notice about a lot of political prisoners is when you look at the cases and whatnot, some of them are still unclear to me. I don't know exactly. Like, for example, with Mumia Abu Jamal, I don't know exactly what happened, but I know it's damn sure not exactly what the government or what the police said. And another thing that folks don't take into account is the context of the times and what was happening and what was going on. And I encourage people we talk about empathy in social work, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Think about that and try that and put yourself in their shoes and think about what might you do if you were in that time and that situation. And I think you can make a lot of progress in your consciousness by just taking those simple steps and trying to apply empathy. Sometimes it can be easy to apply empathy to somebody that aligns with you or, you know, has the same beliefs or the same life experience as you. But it's harder to look outside of that and to, especially, you know, 2024, it's hard to go back to 1960, 1970s, 1980s and do it. You have to put in the work and you have to put an effort. And, for me personally, it's a part of, I look at it as a responsibility. I have a responsibility to do that. I listened to Tupac as a kid and as a young adult that took me through. I have a responsibility to look into the things that he was talking about and the people that he was mentioning. But I mean, and I think that if more of us had that responsibility, then we would have a much clearer understanding, and it wouldn't be acceptable for some of these folks to still be locked up for so long. And I said it's crazy when we talk about time going by, but like even since Mutulu, you know, it's been almost 10 years since we connected, and 10 years is a long time for somebody that's been in prison for 30 years already. And so time is short, and I just encourage people to look deeper, however you want to do that. Look deeper. It's not like the information or the resources aren't there for you. Just look.
Yeah. I think like kind of actually bringing it full circle to like just speaking about hip hop music at the very beginning of our conversation. I'm going to paraphrase this Asada quote, but she just says like hip hop is such a powerful tool to use to educate and inspire the masses. So, you know, don't think that the people that are against us are also not going to try to use that tool against us.
Exactly.
And, you know, I always quote this one Talib Kweli line because I say hip hop is my first political educator. Like hip hop is my first teacher. So there's a Talib Kweli line. He says, "Head to Philly to free Mumia with the Kuji Chagalia." And I'm like however old, 12 years old, 13 years old, being like, what does that mean? I'm in Canada. Okay, head to Philly to free Mumia. I'm like, okay, Mumia Abu Jamal. So I learn about political prisoners through that. And then I learn about Kuji Chagalia, like self-determination. And that's just one lyric in a rap song, So it's not to say that all artists need to be revolutionary or need like that we can't just make art about love or about partying or whatever. Art is free. People can do whatever they want. But I do feel like we've lost kind of that collective responsibility that the artists have. If we do have the ability to reach many people, what can we do with that that's positive? Hip hop's definitely
100%.
lost that, no disrespect to anybody out there, but
yeah, it has. And people that are trying to still do it, they get silenced, just like other things we were talking about.
Yeah.
They're not going to be in the charts.
Yeah.
No. I was just wondering, as we wrap up, Rev, is there anything, perhaps people that are listening to this who want to take more of that revolutionary path, any kind of guidance, advice, or thoughts that you would have to share?
It's interesting because as a youth, like I was just very curious. And so that's why I would like listen to these rap songs and want to understand who's Mumia. Like, say quoting all my real OGs, like, what is he talking about, So that's not advice, obviously. If I feel like if you are curious in nature, that's a very helpful thing. I got to interview Mutulu like early on. I worked for a hip hop magazine in Toronto. And so even though we had already been communicating, I got to interview him. And he has just this one like quote that I always hear in my head. And he's like, we got political prisoners that have been behind these bars for 20, 30, 40 years. And the youth, the young people are out there, like not even realizing that we're the reason that they are able to like freely listen to their iPods and just not have to worry about certain things, And I honestly don't know how to make people care that we have great people that came before us that made it possible for us to live certain freedoms, that maybe weren't available years before we were here. I don't know how to make people care about that. And I know that's like not good advice. That's no advice. But, but like Ace said, like Google, I'm sure Google is co-opted, but Google is free. You can go and buy all these books, or you could just find them somewhere. I implore people, I wish people would just go read one thing. Or watch a YouTube video if you don't want to read, one thing that is about some form of revolutionary history. Even if you want to read about like the Haitian Revolution, or if you want to read about like why the CIA was in Jamaica, or read about the Panthers, read about the Weather Underground, the Black Liberation Army. Like there's so much to be learned. Obviously, like young people are like hip hop culture. We're very into gangster movies and all of that, but these are like real gangsters. The Panthers were righteous, and they did a lot of obviously incredible things for the people and the communities. But like that's gangster. Like you got to be gangster to do that kind of stuff, So I just encourage people to just go learn a little something. If it doesn't interest you after you've just tried to learn it, cool, go back to your life. But maybe it'll interest you, and that'll bring you like a little deeper into it, and a little deeper, and you'll be like, holy shit, like the whole life I've been living is a lie.
Yeah,
that will happen. And it'll feel uncomfortable.
If you go deep enough, it will happen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's true though. My favorite thing that you said is be curious. Mm-hmm. You have to be curious. You have to look a little bit deeper. And I realize even the new generation may not even know what I'm talking about, but if you listen to Tupac and all you listen to is Hit 'Em Up and How Do You Want It, you got to look a little bit deeper. You got to listen to the other songs on the albums, and you got to listen to what he's got to say. And I think people are in these loving revolutionary movements or whatever. Most of us are very giving. So if you write me an email, I'd be happy to give you a list, and I'd almost be willing to send you a book or whatever, at least point you in the right direction. I'd be happy to. It'd actually bring joy to my heart if you reached out. And ask me those things. So
each one teach one. Like same. Like anybody wants to reach out to me for any kind of recommendations, please. And on the other side, not the other side, because but just like do some meditation,
Yes.
Find a meditation teacher, a yoga teacher that has some kind of revolutionary philosophy. You know, you can also go on YouTube if you don't have access to that in your vicinity. But I think it's very clear to me and to a lot of us, I think it's become very clear that, you know, we have to do the work ourselves. So whatever, find a practice, whether it's meditation, yoga asana, qigong, sound healing, find some kind of practice that can help you really examine yourself to make sure that you are like positively contributing to humanity in this time.
Yes. Revolutionize from the inside out, for sure.
Well, I had just one more thought before we go, and two things. One thing, I remembered the woman that Tupac talks about, Dolores Tucker.
Yeah.
Her up, Dolores Tucker. Hard to forget because he says it so much. But I think it would be really cool and a really revolutionary experience if we gathered a group of us for another one of these podcasts. But like I could think like Haki Shakur, Talib, maybe we could even get Mike Africa. There's plenty of people, but it would be really cool just to have a larger conversation and talk story with each other if you'd be interested in that.
Oh, for sure. We just did an event December 15th or so in Philly. Mike Africa interviewed Veronza Bowers, live in person. It was such a great conversation. We will get that posted up to YouTube at some point. But yeah, Mike Africa is doing great work.
Yeah. And one more quick story is when I talked about, we went and met Talib in Brooklyn. And the reason we were over there is because we went to the MOVE organization, had a conference at that time. And I went over there because Delbert was my friend and comrade. And you were actually friends with Eddie, right? Eddie Africa. He's out. You should try to hook up with him. Anyways, so you got this. I'll just use me for an example instead of both of us. Me, and I had my son he's obviously mixed race, but he looked pretty white when he was an infant. And you go into Philly and go into this revolutionary black space. Everybody was black for the most part, but us, 99%. And I think the world would tell us that I'm not going to be invited and I'm not going to be accepted or wanted or whatever. And out of all my experiences in the world, I probably felt more loved and accepted at that place than I ever have before. And everybody asked to hold my son. Everybody wanted to hold him. Everybody showed love. Matter of fact, we have a picture of Fred Hampton Jr. holding Zaid, Sure. So I just want to point that out, that oftentimes the way that we perceive things, or that the world makes us, I shouldn't say the world, but the systems, the powers that be want us to perceive things, it's not the way that things actually are. And so look a little bit deeper and have an open heart and an open mind. You never know where you might find yourself and your mind changing, your consciousness changing. You never know who you might evolve into, but you have to have an open mind, open heart. You have to be curious and you have to be willing to do it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Gosh. Thank you so much, Rev.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, such a wonderful conversation. I feel like we could just go on for days, the three of us, you know?
Yeah, well, for sure. I hope that we can stay connected and whatever that means, connect and collaborate, whatever. But nothing but love. I wish you the best. It was nothing but a pleasure from my part to participate. And it's hard to find, sometimes it's hard for us to find people that can and are willing to talk about these things. I work for the university, and I think oftentimes the university frowns upon me being involved in these kind of things, but it is what it is. I can only be who I am. Do what I do, right? So
Exactly.
Thanks to you too, Alicia. It was great. Every time that we do the podcast, it's come up or brilliant things happen. And so have a great day, Rev, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much. Peace and revolutionary love.
Yes. Love to you. Take care. Bye.
You've been listening to the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, and we just want to say thank you for your continued support. You can catch us on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share our content with the world. But most of all, never forget to keep being revolutionary. Peace.